ever understand. Worthy, 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 you are worthy. Speak your truth, tell your story. Worthy.
Nice to see everybody without their mask.
I know.
I know.
I wish we were all in person, that's for sure. I'm not sure that we're getting any more comfortable with Zoom. I still find it challenging on days. So thank goodness for the Coverly Pro team here to help us.
How's that?
Looks good, Troy.
Is that good?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Oh, there's Marnie. I saw Marnie. The board coming on.
Hi, Linda.
Yes?
Just saying hi.
Oh. Good morning. There's lots of friendly faces on here that I see. This is awesome.
Yes.
Mayor Parvin, nice to see you. Thank you for joining us. Oh, my dear sweet Ellen Brokaw's on. Always a happy face. Melissa Miller's on. Credit Union, that's awesome. Oh, hi Tom. I don't see your picture. Tom is from the San Luis Obispo County Housing Trust Fund, which is awesome. Hi Tom.
Hi Linda.
Good morning. Kathy's coming on. We're doing on time. Looks like we got about 1 minute. Oh, look at this. Hey, Derek. Hey, Matthew. See you guys down there.
Hello.
Hi, Matthew. Good to see ya.
Hey, Linda.
Hey, Derek. Thanks for joining us. Oh, I see Tony Stewart's on. I don't see your picture, Tony, but I see your name. Fort Wainini. Good to see you here.
Hi, Linda.
Good to see ya.
All right. Should we get started, Linda?
Absolutely. Is it time? Okay.
It is.
I have a
All
quick
right,
question. I don't
yeah.
see Karen or Jenny or Dawn
We'll
or
get them on by the time of the board meeting.
Eric or Daniel or Brittany or Ken.
This is Lynette from your Coverly Pro team. We are feverishly letting people in.
Okay.
I'm starting to see your final board members coming in right now.
Great.
Great.
You want to
Perfect.
give
All right.
it 1 more minute.
Oh, do you want me to
There's
give 1 more
Jenny.
minute or should we get started?
If we could wait 1 more minute, there's a
Okay.
lot of people coming in right now. That way you don't have to repeat.
Perfect.
I'm seeing board members come in right now. Okay, it's slowed down. So if you'd like to start, you can see if you have a quorum.
Great. Well, we'll get there for sure. Well, welcome everybody. It's wonderful to see so many friendly faces here today. I wish we were in person, that's for sure. I've always enjoyed meeting everybody at this meeting in January every year, but we're just going to have to get through this on Zoom, hopefully for the last time. Well, it is my pleasure to introduce Alex Russell. He's the chairperson, of the Housing Trust Fund Ventura County and the Housing Land Trust Ventura County boards for both 21 and 22. Alex is the Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer at Mini Mansions, a highly regarded nonprofit affordable housing developer. Alex has been dedicated to the work of the Housing Trust Fund for many, many years. His leadership, focused direction, and dedication is stellar. Daily, I try to figure out how he's able to create more hours in his day to accomplish all the amazing things that he does for our industry. His calm, patient, and intellectual approach to leadership is a pleasure to be a part of and to follow. Alex is going to be our host for today. And so let's welcome him and take it away, Alex.
Thank you, Linda, for the more than generous opening. It's good to see everyone. Like Linda stated, wish we were all in person, but at least we are all together and healthy and safe. We have a lot of exciting things to talk about today, but we do want to get started with some board business. So bear with us. This is our annual meeting, and we just have a few board items to address, and then we'll start giving an overview of all the things we accomplished in the past year, the exciting things that we're working on moving forward, and we have some wonderful guest speakers today as well. So let's start with some board business, and I'd like to make a motion for approval of the 12/15 Board of Directors meeting minutes. Can I get a motion?
Stratus, move to approve.
All right, Stratus makes the motion. Can I get a second?
Tracy,
This is
second.
Anthony. Oh, go ahead, Tracy.
Tracy McCauley makes the second. Any further discussion? If not, can I get the ayes?
Aye.
Aye.
Any noes? Any abstentions? All right, motion carries. I'd also like to make a motion for the board to approve the December and 2021 year-end financials. Can I get a motion?
I'll second that. Is Anthony.
Who is the motion?
Me, Jenny.
Jenny. Jenny makes the motion. Anthony seconds. Ayes?
Aye.
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 Any noes? Any abstentions? And then we'll give kind of a brief, Linda will give a brief update on the community impact notes, the CBC, Federal Credit Union, and Community West Bank.
Yes, thank you, Alex. Just on this portion for board members, we did finalize at the end of the year a wonderful $1 million community impact note with Bank of Sierra, which we greatly appreciate. And we also just closed with the CBC Federal Credit Union, our first community impact note from a credit union for $250,000. And then we also just closed, actually in the last week or so, the Community West Bank community impact note for $1 million. So we definitely finished the year with great investments from our community partners at $2.2 million. So we want to thank those partners. And I'll be talking further in my presentation about how our other community members can support us with lending capital through this format.
Great, thank you, Linda. And we've allocated time for Q&A throughout the event today. But if you have any questions, this is our annual meeting. We want to make sure that everyone has that opportunity. Please drop those questions in the chat box and we'll make sure that we answer them. So with that, like I said, very brief board business. I would like to adjourn our January Board of Directors meeting. And we will now quickly transfer over to why everyone's actually here today, which is to talk a little bit about what we've accomplished in the past year, like I mentioned, what we're doing in the future, and some exciting guest speakers that we have. But before we do that, I do want to thank our dignitaries. We have Moorpark City Mayor Janice Parvin. Thank you for being here. We have Moorpark College President Julius Sokenu. Thank you for being here. We have Carla Mena representing Congresswoman Julia Brownley. And we have Nancy Frawley representing Assemblywoman Jackie Irwin's office. So thank you to our dignitaries. So, like I said, 2021, and as you heard a little bit, was a great year for the Housing Trust Fund of Ventura County. I'm just going to go through and highlight a few of those accomplishments that we have all done together. Next slide. I mean, really what it's about is not the buildings that we create with the funding, but the people that we serve, right? And so Jan, one of the residents at Willett Ranch, is one of those residents that we've served, and you can read her story there. But we really just want to highlight the fact that it's not about building housing, it's about serving people in the community. And Jan is one of the wonderful residents that we're able to serve through the generous support of the Housing Trust Fund. Next slide. And we could not do that without many banks, lenders, government agencies. And here's just a list of a few of those. I won't read through them today, but we have so many funding partners, and you can see it really takes a village to do this type of work. So thank you so much to our 2021 funding partners. So in 2021, many great things happened. We actually have secured over 18.7 million in loans, are given 18.7 million in loans since 2012. That's 18.7 million. That's a tremendous amount, you know, and it really, that money has created such an impact. And we actually have committed another 8.8 million in projects for 2022, which I'll talk a little bit more about those projects. So as you can tell, we're really on the upswing and growing this wonderful organization. We prioritize many of those most in need in our community: veterans, transition-aged youth, farm workers, low and very low income families that are struggling to get by. And that's the, you know, that's the breadth of the populations that we're serving and the community impact that the Housing Trust Fund is making. You know, we've raised over almost $21 million since we started. 4.6 million of that is from the local government. It should be pointed out that every city and the county of Ventura has given financially and through in-kind donations to the Housing Trust Fund of Ventura County. We're one of the few housing trust funds in the state that actually has that kind of support from the local community, and we're so grateful for that. We've also received over 5 million in state and federal grants, or excuse me, in donations, and community impact nodes, which we'll talk a little bit more about throughout this presentation. 847 affordable apartments and homes have been created or will be created through the funding support of the Housing Trust Fund of Ventura County. 847 here in Ventura County. And that's really an amazing accomplishment and something that we're all very proud of. Next slide. So a few of those developments that have been supported in 2021, you can see again, different communities, different populations being served. One of the first that we'd like to highlight is the Westview 2 Village project from the Housing Authority of the City of San Buenaventura. You know, a significant amount of funding was contributed to that project for the construction. That's a large master plan that's actually creating hundreds of units of affordable housing here in Ventura County, and we're very proud to be a part of that wonderful development. We're also provided $800,000 for our Second and B Homeless Solutions Center in Oxnard. Again, this is an innovative product that will actually have a ground floor homeless shelter with permanent supportive housing above it. It's something that Emilio Ramirez and the City of Oxnard have really championed, and our partners, community development partners and Mercy House are hopefully going to be bringing that to fruition soon. It's one of the first homeless shelters. It's actually one of the only homeless shelters here in Ventura County, and one of the first created that's going to be created in many, many years. So we're excited to be part of the solution of ending homelessness in our community. Next slide.
Alex, don't forget that that one is the first one for the land trust.
It is. I should. Thank you. So as mentioned, we also have another nonprofit called the Housing Land Trust of Ventura County, of which I'm the board chair. Linda is also the executive director of that organization. And the Housing Land Trust really works with local government and local partners to take land and preserve it in perpetuity for affordable housing here in our community. So the land for this particular development will be owned by the Housing Land Trust. We will make sure it's affordable in perpetuity, and we are looking for other opportunities. So if you're part of a local government, if you happen to have land or know of land that could be great for affordable housing, please talk to Linda, and we'd love to hopefully bring more of these exciting opportunities to our community. Some of the other developments that we've supported this past year are the Ventura Springs project in Ventura from a community of friends. This development will create more than 100 units of permanent housing for our homeless veterans. It's something that is a public-private partnership between the local government and a community of friends, and it's something we're very proud to be a part of. Additionally, the Rancho Sierra apartments in Ventura County is on county-owned land and is a partnership between many mansions and the Area Housing Authority of the County of Ventura, and will provide 50 units of housing for seniors that were homeless and disabled. So also very excited. You can see each project is serving a different population in a different part of our county, and that really, again, speaks to the strength and support of the Housing Trust Fund. Next slide. A year of accomplishments beyond what we've already talked about. We received an award of over $4 million in matching loan funds from the state of California. And you'll hear a lot about that in the work that we do. The money that is contributed to the Housing Trust Fund because of this state match is leveraged dollar for dollar. That's dollar for dollar. So if you provide $1 to the Housing Trust Fund, we can leverage it at the state and double that amount of money. So it's something we're very proud of. There's actually, as Linda will talk about, several more opportunities in the coming years. And so we just want to highlight the fact that we have been successful and look to continue to be successful in leveraging state money to our local community. As mentioned, Oxnard has donated land for the second and B project, so I won't go over that because I already mentioned that. Residents moved into Willett Ranch in El Portal. That's one of the most exciting parts of the work that we do, is when residents actually move in to the homes that were created. So it was so exciting to see residents move into those two properties. They're beautiful, and it's something that is definitely to be cherished and celebrated. And also our own fearless leader, Linda Braunschweiger, was recognized as one of the top 50 women by the Pacific Coast Business Times. We're so proud of Linda and the work that she's done. She's been our executive director from the very beginning. We could not do this great work without her and the other Housing Trust Fund staff. And so again, so proud of you, Linda, for your accomplishments and the work that you do for the Housing Trust Fund. Next slide. So you can see we have a lot of different sources of funding for the work that we do. Again, speaks to the breadth of support that we have. We actually secured over 1.8 million in federal funding. This is our first CDFI grant. Again, it shows to the strength of the Housing Trust Fund that the federal government is willing to invest in us and the backing of the great work and infrastructure that we've put in place. So that was very exciting and somewhat unexpected this year. So we're very proud to get that money. We're also thankful for the County of Ventura, who is one of our earliest sponsors, and the City of Thousand Oaks through the PLH program, Permanent Local Housing Allocation. We got a grant of $346,737. City of Santa Paula, we are so proud and excited for a $250,000 grant from the City of Santa Paula. Again, every city and the county has supported this organization at some point, and Santa Paula bringing resources was very much appreciated. We also have local foundations. So the Ventura County Community Foundation provided a farm worker housing grant of $102,000, and the County of Ventura also a general fund contribution of $100,000. So again, we're really thankful for the support of these diverse set of agencies, and yeah, you can see over $2.5 million in grants, so we're very appreciative. Last year, we also had a really exciting event. Most of you were there. For those of you who weren't, we had a wonderful keynote speaker, Dr. Tiffany Manuel. She really talked about diversity, the need for affordable housing, and the case for affordable housing. It was quite inspiring for those of you who've seen it. I believe we actually have the video on our website. Is that correct? We do. So check it out. We also were thankful to have a discussion with Giorgio Angelini, the producer of Owned, A Tale of Two Americas. This is a wonderful film. It's on Amazon Prime, so we definitely recommend that you check it out. It really talks a lot about how housing policy created many of the challenges that we're facing here in our society today, and some inspirational tales to overcome that. So definitely worth checking out. And we also actually had some exciting new song and art that was created for that event. I believe we're going to drop something in the chat box related to that. So if you hadn't heard it before, We definitely are thankful for the art and the passion that was created for this one of a kind event. So we're hoping to have another great event in 2022, which we'll talk about later. But again, we also, and it's a little off book, want to thank Coverly Pro. There really are amazing partners. They help put on this event and today's event. So thank you to the Coverly Pro team. Next slide. So, enough of my talking. We have some really great keynote speakers here today, and I'm grateful to have. We are grateful as a community to have such wonderful leaders, and Troy Brown is one of those leaders. Troy Brown was appointed as city manager for the city of Moorpark in 2018. He has over 25 years of public sector experience and has served on numerous community organizations and policy committees with the League of California Cities. In addition, Troy has served as West Coast Regional Vice President for the International City and County Management Association, or ICMA, and he was recently selected by the ICMA board as the association's 2021-2022 president. So please welcome Troy Brown.
Well, thank you, Alexander, and thank you all for having me. And please bear with me as I get through this presentation. I recently came down with some sort of a bug, which is odd given that I've been vaccinated against everything that could get me sick. But this is an important conversation, and really I'm honored to be here. Don't worry, I don't have COVID, but whatever has got a hold of me is getting really warm and cozy. So if you see me grab a water or hear a slight lisp in my words, it's all part of the process. I really like the projects Alexander highlighted. I have an anecdote to supplement what he said about residents moving into homes. As much as our collective successes is focused on projects, this truly is about people. And anyone who knows me knows how much I care about people. And many years ago, I was a budget manager in the city I worked for up north. And I worked with a new analyst in the finance department to finance a 240 unit affordable housing project. And we spent literally months on hearings, forms, filings, council approvals, and everything under the sun. When the project was ready to have a ribbon cutting, they invited me to the grand opening. So I took the analyst that had done all of that paperwork and had really dedicated the better part of several months of his job at trying to finance this project. I took him over to the project and we walked around it, and I said, all that paperwork you were doing, this is what it means. It's about the people that are moving in here and the people that have pathways to home ownership. And I offer that because everything we do in this space is about people. And I, like you, I'm never going to lose sight of that. So I'm going to spend just a few minutes talking about some of the federal policies of the past and the present, and how these policies present challenges for many Americans in achieving home ownership today, and some of the creative ways that we can combat that. Many of you know the current American housing landscape was built over the last century, and understanding its history is essential to addressing the root causes of some of the most complex housing problems that we face today. The history of housing policy in the United States at the federal level includes great achievements that helped millions find pathways to affordable housing and home ownership. But it also includes a troubled legacy of racism and inequality that prevented millions from benefiting from those government programs. Now, I don't offer that as a political, with a big P ideology. I offer that because to really affect change, we have to get at, as I stated earlier, the root causes of home ownership and instability in this area. And in many cases, racism and segregation were explicitly enshrined in federal law. And at other times, they were merely accepted practices in implementing the law. And we still, in many ways, see the effects of these decades-old decisions today. But I think one of the biggest lessons that we can learn from our housing history is that federal fair housing policies must both acknowledge and address the history of racism and segregation in housing. So I'm going to spend a brief time talking about some of the federal programs, some of the shifts that have occurred at the federal level, and the impacts of that on a local level today. So I wasn't around here, but prior to the Great Depression, at one point in time, the federal government actually used to build housing. However, during the Great Depression, millions, just millions of Americans lost their homes, which sort of created the need to address home ownership at a national level. And following the Great Depression, there were several, New Deal? Yeah, several New Deal programs, such as the 1934 Housing Act, the 1937 Housing Act. All of those were enacted to try and combat some of the instability that we experienced during the Great Depression. But these programs shifted the federal government from building homes to providing funding for access to many Americans who had suffered home instabilities in the years throughout the Depression. And through FHA loans and GI bills, which were primarily set aside for, white veterans and middle-class white Americans, millions all of a sudden had access to home ownership. And access to home ownership builds generational wealth. Now, there's a lot to unpack there. I'm sort of not going to fall off of that. But sort of looking at the federal level, right, following the civil rights era, the government shifted its program to provide access to many Americans who were left behind. And the federal government began to provide subsidies in the form of Section 8 loans and other programs to designed to offset the cost of housing. And many of these programs targeted rental assistance, although home ownership, that certainly is an area where the federal government tries to provide funding. Much of the implementation of those programs, they're difficult to universally apply across the country. And as I said earlier, there's a lot to unpack there. And I could talk about the rise of suburban America and some of the urban renewal policies, but essentially the influx of funding into the affordable housing, the challenge became that once the funding became available for housing to everyone, the demand for the federal funds by far outpaced available funding. So a lack of a stable funding source at the federal funds have exacerbated sort of a growing need. But more importantly, and this is something that we face today, the structure of the income qualifications present a whole host of new problems. So aside from the funding amount and having sufficient funding available, I believe that the structure of the income qualifications is going to be the crisis of our times as it relates to actually getting affordable units in the ground at the local level. So, the housing of urban development, HUD's suggestion for monthly housing costs at or below 30%, that's difficult, if not impossible to meet in California. So with no end in sight to the rising prices of single family homes and limited funding set aside for home ownership and down payment assistance, middle class and middle income families are the ones that are often priced out of the market. And they have a lack of bona fide resources available to them. So, in the past, the federal government had sort of looked at, how do we get home ownership for all? Then how do we sort of get home ownership for the group that we left behind? Now the silent group that's being left behind are the workforce groups. They're the police, they're the firefighters, they're the teachers, they're the grocery workers. Those are the ones that are working decent wages, yet can't afford to live in homes. But, it's not that simple. We have a homelessness crisis that also affects home ownership. And it's true that California is in the midst of an unprecedented homeless crisis that requires immediate attention. The state is committed to addressing the needs of homelessness for the foreseeable future. On the other hand, it's becoming clear that the state is currently not prioritizing home ownership activities for moderate and low income buyers. And at some point, the lack of attention in this area of homeownership will influence the overall housing market. I think there's another factor that we're rowing upstream against, and that's moderate income ownership. Federally, middle income housing is not subsidized. So with the general thought being that this segment of the US population is self-sustaining. But recently, local governments, including us, have been required to use their own funds and resources to promote and support homeownership at that income level. So, this is, every time I get a chance to talk about this, I talk about it. But the elimination of redevelopment agencies and that 20% housing set aside is very much an albatross for local funding. Federal assistance to this segment of the population would go far to lessen the current housing crisis for this income group. And the trickle down thinking could also make starter neighborhoods more affordable. We need to really look at ways to retain local control of land use, because that appears to be sort of, the state's answer to it, because the federal government, they're providing the funding. Cities don't build it at the local level, and states, they have control over legislation and land use. And then every year, new legislation keeps chipping away at local control over land use decisions. In 2021, it was allowing duplexes on 2-lot subdivisions by right. For example, the RENA model of the state telling communities how many units they need to zone can work, but local governments need to be allowed to decide how to reach that total. In Ventura County, with SOAR initiatives, our voters have elected to build up rather than sprawling out. And we should be allowed to implement that, rather than being forced to live in a one-size-fits-all approach from Sacramento. But it's going to take all of us, government, nonprofits, and the private sector working together to help. This isn't just about housing. We have to create jobs with wages that sustain families. And there are countless stories of family members, including mine and likely some of yours, where children are staying home longer, working just as hard as we did, and yet the housing market is outpacing their wages. This is the crisis that we face. And development and collaboration through resource sharing and advocacy on the policy realm, this all affects our ability to chip away at this at the federal and local levels. And this requires creative solutions and finding ways to have our teachers, our firefighters, our first responders, our grocery store workers, and others pathways to housing. Doing so will build generational wealth among the population and contribute to quality of life for all of us. We have to keep the American dream within reach, and it's not just about filling out forms and checking boxes, but actually finding pathways to home ownership. This makes our society stronger. This makes our society more sustainable from a human capital perspective. And by golly, it's just the right thing to do. So it's not easy, and we all know that. And it's really not a lot to ask for, having an opportunity to achieve the American dream. But like Alexander said in the beginning of his presentation, it takes a village. And I'm just glad to be in this fight with you, and really glad to have all of you in the Housing Trust Fund alongside me in this journey. So I'm going to wrap up there. There'll be some time for Q&A at the end. We're doing some pretty incredible things out here in Moorpark, like we're doing in Ventura County. I'll tell you, I've been blessed to have the opportunity to work in 4 different counties in California. And some of the things we're doing on the affordable housing front here are just unrivaled in other counties around the state. So I applaud you for your work. I'm glad to be here with you, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Troy. Thank you for your passion, for the wonderful comments and background. We will be doing Q&A with both speakers at the end. And so I'd like to now introduce Tracy McCauley, the Vice Chair of the Housing Trust Fund of Ventura County, to present our next speaker. Tracy.
Great, thank you, Alex. Good afternoon, everyone. It's my distinct pleasure to introduce our second keynote speaker today, Ray Pearl. Mr. Pearl has served as the Executive Director of the California Housing Consortium since 2009. Under his leadership, the CHC unites the voices of multiple sectors, including development, building, finance, and government, in advocating to create and preserve the affordable housing the state needs to lift Californians out of poverty. Beyond his critical role with the CHC, Mr. Pearl currently serves as on the Westlake Village City Council. Please join me in warmly welcoming Mr. Pearl.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And like Troy, I'm really thrilled to be here with all of you today. And thank you very much for the hard work that all of you do for housing in Ventura County. My job as the executive director of the California Housing Consortium is to advance the cause of affordable housing throughout the state of California. And our work is done primarily in Sacramento with the state legislature. I have been at this job now for almost 13 years, and there's an awful lot that has changed in Sacramento. From the early days of my job, never being mentioned, no mention of affordable housing or housing. We used to, when Governor Schwarzenegger was in office, we would search his State of the State addresses for a mention of the word housing. And you fast forward to Governor Newsom, who did an entire State of the State speech on the need for housing when he first came to office. We are now above the fold news, a top two, along with our continuing pandemic, a top two policy issue. And while that is good news, we have the attention of our statewide leaders and our local leaders. It also means the problem of affordable housing shortage and homelessness is only getting worse. As was mentioned, I also bring a very local perspective to my job, because I was elected in 2018 to serve on the Westlake Village City Council. And on the City Council, I serve on our land use committee. I'm active with the League of California Cities on their housing committee. And as you can imagine, there's no doubt that my worlds often collide. I now get to go to Sacramento and do my job, and then come to the local level and have to implement some of those policies that we're going to talk about, and some that Troy mentioned. And those worlds do collide because what's coming from Sacramento, the major trend, is statewide legislation that is forcing local government to pay attention to housing. I'm going to name a few of those. Examples include enforcement of the Housing Accountability Act. For those of us active in local government, think about the lawsuit against Huntington Beach and sort of the shockwaves that sent through cities that were not in compliance with their housing element and were not building or planning for affordable housing. Enforcement by the Attorney General is something that I think all of us, it's definitely new to all of us. It is not the norm to have the Attorney General involved in enforcement issues related to housing, but that has certainly stepped up. SB 35, used to guarantee timelines and approval of housing under certain conditions. Accessory dwelling unit legislation. Furthering fair housing goals used to be words on a sheet of paper. Troy mentioned it. It permeates just about everything that is coming out of Sacramento. And then last year, SB 9 and 10, which Troy also alluded to. SB 9, very controversial, essentially, in the words of many, ending single family zoning. SB 10 allowing folks to build up, local governments to bypass a number of environmental rules. That one is self-selecting. If you don't like it, you don't have to use it, but still controversial nonetheless. And I think the message that we're hearing from Sacramento is essentially this. And on the local level, we don't have to like it. We don't have to agree with it. But I think this is the mindset coming from Sacramento. And that is that we're really tired of the decisions that many local governments have made over the past 20 years. And we as a state legislature are now going to force you in local government to make different decisions. The focus on legislation coming from Sacramento is around making housing elements real. In the past, I think local city councils ignored it, argued about it. You may have heard SCAG giving us numbers that we had to comply with. And really what it was a planning exercise that most people didn't pay attention to, other than city managers that I know really worried about it. But now this document, the attempt from Sacramento anyway, is to have real teeth. They want to make production real. Troy mentioned in his remarks that we in local government don't produce housing. It's absolutely true. Sacramento doesn't care. They want to hold local government accountable not only for the planning, but for the production. There's a focus on infill housing, affordable housing, the need for rental and more multifamily, housing at all income levels. And I think starting this year, you're going to hear more about home ownership and closing the wealth gap through home ownership. I think housing element compliance is one of the things that you're going to hear an awful lot. What used to be an esoteric exercise really does have local governments saying yes to planning for housing, whether they want to or not. There's council members that love housing, some that don't. But what unites every council member is the desire to not be in the crosshairs of Sacramento. Local control issues pop up. There's no doubt about it. But one of the reasons why we have a state legislature is to help solve statewide problems that local governments either can't or in some cases won't. I want to use my own city, Westlake Village. I know we're slightly out of Ventura County, but we're Ventura County adjacent, so we'll call it close enough. With the focus from the state government coming down on local government, the city of Westlake Village for a very long time had a business park specific plan that was in the works. It was a 7 to 10 year effort that reimagined the center of our town that's currently mostly an industrial area. And for the first time last year, our current city council passed on a 5-0 vote a specific plan that includes housing, including affordable housing. And we have already approved a senior assisted living facility. And we have a whole lot of interest in housing and affordable housing in our city because of that specific plan. When you think about a city like mine that hadn't approved an awful lot of housing over the past 10 to 15 years, and you multiply that by a number of other cities, Westlake, we're 8,500 people strong, but you multiply what we do in our city with so many others. And I think what's happened is this confluence of events that started really in 2017 and 18 with a beginning to have a momentum towards a real focus and priority on housing and affordable housing. SB 35 I mentioned earlier was really the first out of the gate in 2017 that forced local government under certain circumstances to shorten the timelines for affordable housing production. 2018 included the passage of Prop 1, which was a major housing bond. And then near and dear, I know to your hearts, SB 2, a long-held goal from the affordable housing community on a permanent source of funding for affordable housing that included $25 million for local housing trust funds and local planning grants. Now, SB 2 is quite frankly more, it's a better dream than it is necessarily a reality, because as you know, when legislation goes through the sausage making process, it doesn't always come out the way you'd like it. But SB 2 still generates some money nonetheless. Fast forward to Governor Newsom and to the budget he just unveiled a couple of weeks ago. The state budget certainly has a focus on housing and homelessness. We at CHC call it a good start. There's state tax credits, there's $1 billion towards production, there's homelessness prevention ideas, Project Home Key. However, from the $40 billion surplus that we've all heard in the news, there's no new money. And I think we would all agree that additional money is needed to address not only short-term homelessness issues, but also long-term affordable housing issues. And that both of those are critical and neither can be ignored. One of the things I also want to mention and encourage all of you to think about as you go about your daily lives, both your work lives, but also your personal lives. Troy also mentioned it, and I want to focus a little bit, this concept of local control. And you think about the two hats that I wear at the California Housing Consortium, and then as a member of a city council. Local control is absolutely crucial. I don't think you're going to find a single council member in the state that's going to say, oh no, let Sacramento tell us everything that we should do. But if you work for a city, it is almost absolute that you must be supportive of the concept at all costs. I challenge that notion. And I challenge it because I support local control, but I also support thoughtful housing planning and production. If you live in a city that keeps saying no to housing, that fights planning goals and objectives, that wants to sue your council of government, eventually what's going to happen is you're going to lose local control over where your housing goes, because it's no longer a debate on if you're going to plan for housing, you're going to plan for it. And so the local control, to me, that we retain is the where, what it looks like, how it's planned, not if it's planned. And we need to acknowledge that we are in the middle of a crisis and that we should be worrying about contributing to a solution. And it starts with, yes, it starts with being a good neighbor, and it starts with being active in your own community. What it cannot be, and what I think we hear too often, is it can't be, well, I live in Ventura, so yes, I support affordable housing in Oxnard or Santa Barbara. It can't be, I live in Westlake Village, so hey, many mansions, can you build some housing in Thousand Oaks? It needs to be that we're all going to play a part in working towards housing in our communities. And how do we do that? If you want housing to matter in your city, if you want the work that the state government is doing to not be one size fits all, I would just encourage you to get involved in local elections, write letters to the editor, speak at planning commission meetings and council meetings. Your local elected officials, like me, we need to hear from people that care about housing, because guess who shows up to speak? Guess who writes the letters? And at the end of the day, I can tell you, I represent my residents, I represent my constituents. And when all I'm hearing is no, it makes it hard to say yes. And I just want to end with this. I believe that we can all be pro-environment. We want to fight climate change. We care about fire safety. Think about the Woolsey fire that came through and impacted my community. But none of that has to be at the expense of ensuring every Californian who wants to have a roof over his or her head has one. And the work that all of you do is crucial in our region. I applaud your efforts, and I thank you for having me here today.
Well, thank you so much, Ray. That was very powerful and passionate. So now I have the opportunity to sort of answer some questions. We do have some, or have you all answer questions, excuse me. We have some questions that have popped up in the chat. I think first of all, one of the questions was, what are concrete steps that local jurisdictions can take to address the historical racism issues? I don't know, Ray, do you want to start with that one since you touched more on local?
I think this concept of furthering fair housing, you hear the flip side of it is you'll hear people say, oh, you, not necessarily me, but you represent a city that likes exclusionary zoning. You moved out into the suburbs because you want your single family home on a giant lot. And I think some of the concrete steps are being taken. I think there's a whole division at HCD that is focused, Housing and Community Development in Sacramento, that is focused on furthering fair housing. And I think the reality for local government is we all too often, I think, close the borders and look at where we sit in our city and say, this is all I'm here to care about. And I think part of our job is, of course, I represent Westlake Village. That's who elected me. It's what I worry about every day as a council member. But I also live in a region, I live in a state, I live in a county. Homelessness, the need for housing is not just a they problem, it's a we problem. And I think that similarly, with systematic racism throughout the years of housing in the nation is something that we can't ignore and we have to address. And I do think it's incumbent upon each and every one of us in local government to make sure that we are true to the words in our housing elements, which now, by the way, all have to address these issues so that we are, I think, more in tune and more willing to say yes to things I think we've been able to say no to in the past.
Troy, did you want to interject something?
Yeah, just real quick on that. I think Ray really captured that really well. You know, if you look at sort of what created this disparity right? It was access to programs and services and funding to certain segments of the population. So some of the things that cities can do today on the ground is look and see, of those pass-through dollars, where are those dollars going? You know, are they going to the people that sort of need them, or are they going to sort of certain parts of town? Who's actually accessing the programs? Now, there's all sorts of rules and regulations around it, but really just ensuring people that they have opportunities, irrespective of, you know, creed, religion, any of that stuff. That can sort of start to unwind that, a little bit of that systemic stuff over time, just making sure that the people that need the programs can get access to the programs. You know, and on top of that, the other thing, and it sort of moves on to Ray's point, but we got to get units in the ground, whether those units are for one level, you know, maybe they're high end, whatever those are, we got to get these units in the ground, and we've got to facilitate ways for the private market to do what they do and get out of the way as government and let them do that. And we have a role in that, not only in the entitlement process, but in our fee structures and a lot of different things. So looking at who's accessing the programs and actually getting the units in the ground will help everyone.
Thank you. We have a couple of questions from Mike Merriweather, but let's go with this one. Simi Valley just adopted an urgency ordinance to address SB 9. How will cities' actions versus state impact housing development? Either one of you would like to take that. Troy, you're on mute.
Yeah, this is my first Zoom meeting, right? No, I'll start with that. I'm going to flip that on its head because I aspire to exactly what Ray said. I think that you know, cities' actions, to the extent that they harm development, the state will step in, and you're starting to see some of that in the rules that they're setting forth for certification of your housing element, which will provide resources and access to your community. The state has already got to the point where they're telling people you have to, you know, set aside land by right if you don't have enough land. So I think to the extent that cities try to combat what the state is trying to do, I think that the additive inverse will happen, and we will lose control locally if that happens.
And I'm going to back up Troy. I think the more we fight the state, the more the state is going to make it harder on us. And so the city of Westlake Village adopted an urgency ordinance around SB 9, and we weren't necessarily thrilled. If you think about Westlake Village, we are a community that has no rental housing. We have a vast majority single family, and we have some condos, but we don't have your traditional multifamily. Now, our business park specific plan contemplates multifamily. We're trying to address that part of the market all the way down to extremely low income. So SB 9 is, you can imagine in my community, incredibly controversial. But the urgency ordinance that we adopted was about accommodating a law that we may not love, that our residents may not love, but how can we do that to the best of our ability in Westlake Village? And it goes back to design standards. What do we want? Should someone want to do this and enact and build a project that we no longer have a say over, what will it look like? How will it be done? And so I think our job is to work with the state and show ourselves to be a good actor, because I think ultimately it's almost like a parent relationship. When your kids finally learn the lesson, the parents take their foot off the gas. Well, I think when we in local government really get to the, yes, we're willing to accommodate housing, I think the state will undoubtedly move on to other issues.
Great. There's a great question in the Q&A here, or the chat box. What is being done to help the transitional age youth, even those who are choosing to have children at young age? This is a housing challenge that we see in the county that has not been addressed much. What do you both think about that?
I think that's incredibly complex. I do. You know, as it relates to transitional youth, you know, they're going to, because, and it gets a little bit about what I said earlier, the way that we're sort of measuring access to certain programs and services is based on income. We need to look at that. You know, that may not sort of be the answer. It was something that was born out of, you know, an era many, many years ago, and it totally makes sense. but it doesn't necessarily get at, income deficient people, transitional youth, people that have abuse issues, or even, physical abuse issues. So, as it relates to transitional youth in our community, you're going to have to get at that through zoning and sort of allow it. And if you can get at that through zoning and make it allowable, and there's a market for it, then the market will build it. But for us to sort of have a play in that space, it's really difficult because our formulaic approach to this is based on income. And that may or may not be sort of the best way to approach this moving forward. I liken it to sort of sales tax, and I can talk all day about sales tax. But sales tax today is based on a methodology, meaning almost back to the gold standard, right? Now we're going online and buying things at Amazon. That whole law will need to be sort of looked at. And I think how you qualify people and what their needs are for housing, I don't know that income's going to be the way to move forward into the future, are going to be the solution. But, immediately, I think the best thing you have to do is sort of address it in zoning. It's a real challenge. It's a real challenge.
I agree with everything Troy said, and I would just highlight this one thing. And it's listening to so many of the reading in the chat, listening to the questions that are being asked, the things that we're asked to help solve. Housing is a big solution to so many of these different things. The governor right now is talking about housing as a climate change solution. Well, that means building up near transit, urban infill, all of those. In the transitional youth world, it's incredibly complex. I am not an expert, but what I would say is that Troy's right. We have outdated models. We're trying to solve problems using yesterday's thinking. And I would just challenge us all to view housing as part of that solution, to think regionally, to think bigger. And undoubtedly, the housing is part of that equation that will lead to better outcomes.
Linda, there's a question here about sustainability as it relates to affordable housing. I'd really like to talk about that, because this to me is a crisis that I face every single day. And it's not just sustainability and climate, but it's this notion that it costs X dollars to build an affordable unit. I don't care who you are, it just costs money to build those affordable units. For them to be designated as affordable, they can only sell for Y. So the gap in between there is where we all live, right? How do we close that gap? And what I see happening is, be it sustainability, be it construction costs, be it materials, the cost to construct a home continues to rise, and the amount they can sell it for isn't rising enough. So that gap is getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So we need to figure out, what's our priority here, and I'm by no means suggesting that we throw sustainability to the wind, but on some level, we've either got to fill that gap with resources and find additional resources, or we've got to find a way to increase wages so that the house can sell for more, or we've got to find a way to control the cost of that house. And within that gap is the challenge that we all have, which is why we have all of you here to try and collaborate and figure out ways to close that gap. But that sustainability conversation, that construction cost conversation, all that is rising much higher than wages are. And it's actually making the problem worse. So we've got to figure out, what's important here, focus on that, or throw more money at this problem. And I don't think there's more money to throw at it.
And then Troy, on the affordable housing side, most of it is rental.
Right.
The rents are capped.
That's right.
And we're being asked to do more and more on sustainability, which, by the way, affordable housing home builders are more than willing to do so. But that gap you're talking about, it's getting wider and wider. And one of the things I say in Sacramento is, wouldn't it be great if there were a day where what Sacramento did with the money that, let's say, Governor Newsom is proposing, we really need a pot of money that is for sticks and bricks. Here is the housing money. You have other goals, sustainability, I support that. Let's have a sustainability pot of money.
That's exactly right.
Put your money where your mouth is and say, we're going to do both of these. But then the politics enter this, and As we have rising costs on construction, labor, sustainability is just one. I don't want to pick on it, but there's an awful lot of public policy objectives that gets thrown on affordable housing, and it just makes it harder and harder. And then I'm going to get on this soapbox really quickly. Troy, you mentioned it earlier, the demise of redevelopment, one of the worst policy decisions in my 25-year career.
Yep.
It has set us back in major ways and was a gigantic mistake in the housing law.
Yep, I agree.
Wow, this was a great discussion. Let's do one last one. I see wonderful comments, which we'll make sure that get recorded. There was one reference to outdated AMIs and the impact on affordable housing on that. Does one of you want to take a wrap up on that?
I could take a shot at it. So you're right. I mean, that's exactly right. Those outdated AMIs are the things that it has the effect of stratifying people in probably places that they don't need to be, right? So because they're so out of whack, someone who actually could probably qualify for moderate gets forced down to lower income. So I think if we're not going to change the AMIs, right, which is a whole nother conversation, there's a lot to unpack there, then we have to fund the appropriate level of where the need is, right? At least in my city, even though the state gives us targets to try and shoot for as it relates to the different thresholds of affordability that we have to provide for, the lower I get into that realm in my city, it gets harder to build that stuff. So I put extra time and effort into those areas, particularly when I have developers moving forward on new development, or when I get a unit that I own that may be at one level, even though it may be deed restricted for a certain amount of time, when that deed comes up, flip it to the next level. So I agree. I think that AMI levels absolutely need to be looked at, but in the absence of that, focus on where the real need is. And that's one way to sort of get around it, but it doesn't fix it. I completely agree. I think it needs to be looked at.
Well, Troy, you and I both know that in some places AMI is almost market rate.
That's exactly right.
And so why are we going through all of this effort to produce market rate housing? Let the market rate builders do that. We've got to serve very low, extremely low income Californians, and sometimes, especially in places like where Moorpark, Westlake Village, Ventura County, it can be extremely hard to do so. AMI, it's the tool we have today, but I think there's, again, bold new thinking. There's got to be a different way. And by the way, one of those is a renewed effort and renewed focus on furthering fair housing. I think those words are going to open up a lot of different possibilities in the coming years that I think are going to be meaningful and impactful.
Wow, this was a great discussion. Thank you so much, Ray and Troy, for your presentation, but also just doing this round robin on questions. I think that's the best part of these kinds of meetings. So thank you very much. We will go through all the other questions and comments and digest it, as well as maybe put it into a document and share with others. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Linda.
Well, absolutely. And I am really excited now to share with you about what we're doing in 2022. First of all, our team is growing thanks to the ongoing support from many of you in the audience today. There's our little staff. I think I'm the shortest of the crowd. It was pointed out many times to me, but that's okay. And we're excited because at the end of December 2021, we were able to hire our new Deputy Director and Loan Portfolio Manager, Jason Gaffner. Jason brings nearly 2 decades of experience in commercial real estate finance and over $600 million in real estate debt and equity negotiated and closed. So be sure to reach out to Jason if you have any questions about our loan products, about our funding availability, or you have suggestions of loan products that you think we should be considering. Oops. Apologize there. Well, sadly, it's been almost 2 years of a pandemic, and the affordable housing crisis has sadly gotten worse, as we've been discussing. The United States now faces a shortage of 6.8 million rental homes that are affordable and available to extremely low-income renters, whose households' incomes are at or below 30% of area median income. And this is according to the National Low-Income Housing Coalition. The COVID-19 crisis made it very clear that access to affordable housing is essential for individual and public health. In the United States, there's more than 7.5 million extremely low-income renters spending more than half of their incomes on housing. Such cost burdens lead too often to housing instability and homelessness. The coalition's research also found that there is no state, metropolitan area, or county where a full-time minimum wage worker can afford a two-bedroom apartment today. Bedroom, 93% of US counties, minimum wage workers can't afford a single bedroom apartment. According to the Dyer Sheehan Group market study published in July 2021, the average rent in Ventura County for a one-bedroom is $2,039, and they must earn $69,909 a year or $34.95 an hour to afford that apartment. For a family to rent a two-bedroom apartment, the average rent is $2,427, which requires a $41.61 hourly pay rate. Unbelievable. Across the country and here in Ventura County, many restaurants, retail, hospitality, and gig economic workers lost their jobs or saw deep cuts to their income over the last 2 years. So they have had the hardest time keeping up with their rent. The supply-demand imbalance only increases in the last few years. The affordable housing units being built or added to affordable inventory are simply outnumbered by the growing demand. As we've been discussing, solving the affordable housing crisis certainly is not an easy task. And despite the many varied efforts, developing affordable housing continues to be an uphill battle, according to many of our local developers that we work with. Affordable housing developers face several roadblocks, including high land and construction costs, outdated zoning regulations, general NIMBYism, lengthy permitting timelines, and the lack of funding options. While there continues to be reform in land use and zoning regulations, it is still difficult for the private sector to reach low-income renters without subsidies, just as Ray mentioned. While the pandemic had a negative impact on many areas of commercial real estate, it only heightened the need for affordable housing. In fact, while the retail and hospitality sectors suffered and are struggling to recover now, the multifamily and affordable housing sectors actually outperformed most sectors throughout the pandemic. One reason for this is that general contractors were deemed essential workers due to the existing housing crisis, which was worsened, of course, by COVID-19. We believe that the affordable sector as a whole is positioned for a bright future once the pandemic is behind us. And here are some of the reasons why we believe this. Demand for affordable housing projects obviously is increasing. The need for affordable housing has grown in recent years thanks to rising home prices and overall housing shortages, and the COVID pandemic has exacerbated that need immensely. As many lost their jobs and the economy moved into a recession, the number of people who qualified for affordable housing increased, driving demand. Affordable housing has always been a strong performer, though. Investors considering affordable housing a stable investment, as the sector has historically performed well both in times of economic uncertainty and in times of economic growth. The main reason for this is that housing is a necessity and supply consistently outstrips demand. In addition, occupancy rates at affordable housing communities tend to be high and turnover is low, which boosts retail income for investors and makes it a more stable environment for residents. Let me tell you a little bit about a housing trust fund and where we came from and where we're going. The trust fund is a certified community development financial institution referred to as a CDFI. We're like a nonprofit bank. The U.S. Department of Treasury CDFI fund and the state of California have certified us as a CDFI. Community development financial institutions are basically a private financial institution that is 100% dedicated to delivering responsible, affordable lending to help low income, low wealth, and other disadvantaged people and communities to join the economic mainstream. CDFIs play an important role in generating economic growth and opportunity in some of our nation's most distressed communities. By offering tailored resources and innovative programs that invest federal dollars alongside private capital, state and local dollars, helps fund and support economically disadvantaged communities. We are very proud to be a CDFI, and we worked hard for that status. The Housing Trust Fund was created really to provide a revolving source of lending capital for the development of affordable housing through primarily short-term loans, 1 to 5 years at below market interest rates that are repaid from construction or permanent financing and revolve right back into our fund. In 2021, we increased our construction loan limits to $4 million for loans that include the Proposition 1 matching fund for construction or pre-development / construction loans. That's opened up a new avenue for us, and we're excited to see what we can fund and how we can have a bigger impact. By creating innovative partnerships and sources of private and public capital, the Trust Fund helps to expand the supply of affordable housing for extremely low all the way to moderate income residents in our community. The Housing Trust Fund supports housing development that enhance the quality of life and preserve long-term affordability of housing as a community resource. So we fund different types of housing. We fund new construction of affordable rental housing and the conversion of non-residential buildings to housing. We do acquisition and rehabilitation of existing market rate residential units into affordable units. Affordable deed restricted single family residential and condominium developments, particularly for first-time home buyers. We can also fund single room occupancy developments, as well as affordable residential portions of a mixed use development. So our funds, our loan funds, are used for primarily pre-development expenses, architecture, engineering, environmental reports, etc. We can also do acquisition of property to be developed for affordable, it's deed restricted affordable. We do construction and development expenses such as site preparation and materials. And then we can also do bridge and gap funding. Our board of directors is looking at options for a potential long-term financing with maybe a small portion of our fund. Wait on that, and we'll be telling you more in the coming months. In 2021, the trust fund reached a milestone that Alex mentioned. We lent over 18.7 million in funding and commitment since we began lending in 2013. And we're very proud that that impact is 847 affordable units. But today we are looking at potential loan requests starting this year of 22 million. That is in our pipeline. And we are doing everything possible to raise the needed lending capital to meet that demand. Our revolving loan is able to successfully leverage local, county, state, and federal funds with charitable, corporate, individual, and investor funds, all to meet that demand. The pipeline of proposed projects include rental housing for homeless, farm workers, veterans, youth transitioning from foster care, units for seniors, and extremely low income to moderate. No doubt this list will grow as new projects are being proposed. In the chat box, there should be a link to our pipeline that is shown on our chart, on our website. You heard a little bit about Proposition 1. Well, in Proposition 1 in 2018 was passed by the voters of California to help address the need for more affordable housing. Proposition 1 is the Veterans and Affordable Housing Bond Act. And in it, it provides a rare opportunity to bring currently 15 million of state funds over the next 3 years to Ventura County residents through affordable housing development. To do this, though, we as a community in partnership with the trust fund must raise up to 15 million in matching funds to bring those dollars from Sacramento back to our community. To date, we've been awarded a little over 4 million of the state match funds from an earlier round. The trust fund will begin dispersing those funds this March in 2 exciting developments. Again, has been mentioned before. One is in Ventura by the Housing Authority of the City of San Buenaventura, called Westview 2 for seniors. And then also Rancho Sierra Apartments on county land and being developed by Many Mansions and the Area Housing Authority of the County of Ventura. We need your help, though, to raise that matching fund to use for lending capital so that we can match the state Prop 1. The only vehicle to bring those Prop 1 dollars back to Ventura County is through a housing trust fund. Our goal is to leave as little as possible in Sacramento, so Ventura can use these funds for housing in our community. And we're moving on to this year later. We're excited because coming this March, we will be helping support Many Mansions and the Area Housing Authority of Ventura again at their grand opening of Mountain View Apartments, which is in the city of Fillmore. Mountain View Apartments is providing 77 2- and 3-bedroom apartments for families earning between 30 and 50% of AMI. This development is a great example of the revolving nature of our fund. The trust fund provided the project a little over 1.2 million for a land acquisition loan at below market interest rate. And in July of 2019, we funded the loan for 2.5 years. But the developer was able to leverage our early funding and secure other sources, allowing them to actually pay off the loan 15 months early. And this allows the Housing Trust Fund those funds back into our revolving fund, and then an opportunity for us to put it back out in another loan. It is a win-win scenario, and that is why the trust fund was formed. One of the ways that we've been raising funds to match with the Prop 1 is through a community impact note. The Housing Trust Fund model was created to generate public, private, and charitable sources of funding and to leverage the maximum amount of capital for affordable housing development. And the trust fund has successfully leveraged capital not traditionally used for affordable housing financing. And that's important because that's an asset we bring to the community. The trust funds, the Housing Trust Fund, we seek to make Ventura County a more affordable place to live by harnessing the collective resources of the business community, foundations, financial institutions, and individuals of wealth who create strong investments in our community. It's not just government funds. We're leveraging all of these sources. By maximizing investments in safe, stable, affordable workforce housing, we can collectively sustain our workforce through these challenging economic times. Now, we understand that companies want to give back to their communities, yet they often have limited philanthropic funds. But what if the companies in and around Ventura County could give back and get more in return? Solving the affordable housing crisis is an investment that offers both giving people in our community places to live they can afford and a financial return to the companies providing investment capital to the Housing Trust Fund. This model is commonly referred to as impact investing. Impact investing is the intention of financial return along with constructive outcomes used to solve today's challenges. The investor could do good, make a positive impact, and receive a return. Impact investing can help sustain our most valuable resources, people, right here in our community and near our companies. Simply stated, the trust fund is looking for social impact investors to loan Housing Trust Fund capital to lend for the development of affordable housing in our community. Your investment will have a positive impact and make a small return. Housing Trust Fund Ventura County will provide evidence, data, and impact annually on the outcomes of your investment. We've been using the community impact note model to raise investment capital with financial institutions and foundations for many years now. To date, we've raised 5.2 million. I want to thank our newest 2021 investors, Bank of Sierra at $1 million, CBC Federal Credit Union at $250,000, our first credit union we're excited about, and Community West Bank also at $1 million. So we want to thank them because they see the value in investing in the Housing Trust Fund. By harnessing the collective resources in Ventura County and our investors' desire to be part of effective problem solving, the trust fund uses proceeds of the community impact note to drive the creation of affordable housing we need in this community, including, for example, housing that is affordable to teachers, first responders, nurses, and minimum wage earners. We continue to place priority funding for developments with units designated for homeless, farm workers, veterans, youth transitioning from foster care, and extremely low income. As you've heard, we have a lot on our plate in 2020, but we can only do that if we partner with you in the community. And that is the success of our model, is working hand in hand with our community partners, whether they be from government, private industry, charities, or individuals. And it's all for the betterment of Ventura County. So now I would be happy to take a couple of questions that might be in the chat box. If I can now go over there and see if anybody asks me any questions. Thank you, Mike Merriweather, for the congratulations. It was asked, what is our biggest goal for the Housing Trust Fund in 2022? That's a great one. Our goal is to expand our lending capital and find ways to receive investments beyond government to private industry and foundations and individuals. We are addressing a financial crisis with regards to affordable housing. And the only way that we can be a major player in addressing the affordable housing situation is if we can get more lending capital. And so that's my biggest goal for 2022. Let's see, what else is being asked in here? Let's see. And as Don Dyer points out, our model really emphasizes local business and employees investing in housing solutions through our community impact note. You're absolutely right, Don. This has been Don's mantra from day one, and we are working very hard to bring the business community to the table to help work on the need for housing for all and for housing from extremely low to moderate, that workforce population that's out there. All right, maybe somebody can help me. Is there any other questions in here? I know that our Coverly Pro put a list in there of our pipeline. We also have on our website all the loans that we have funded over the last couple of years. So happy to have you look at that as well. All right. Is there anything else? I don't know if I missed a question. Lots of thank yous to Troy and to Ray. All right. Coverly, am I missing any questions? Let's see, looks like I got them all. Okay, great. And now I think I get the opportunity to pass it back to Alex. Look at us, we might be finishing 5 minutes or so ahead of time. Alex, take it away.
All right, thank you, Linda. And there's a lot of exciting things ahead. So what are some ways that you can help support those efforts? So Linda talked about the community impact note. Again, we've been reaching out to business leaders, trying to bring in more local dollars that we can leverage, but your individual dollars are leveraged as well. So anything that you can contribute to this worthy effort is appreciated. You can go to our website and make gifts. You can also identify the Housing Trust Fund under Amazon Smile. You get to identify a local nonprofit that you support, and a portion of your purchases go to support our efforts. And again, that money is matched. So there's lots of ways to get involved. If you have any interest in being on a committee or possibly being on a board or supporting our efforts, please reach out to Linda. And again, when affordable housing developments come up in our community and funding and other things come up, we need everyone's support. This is something that everyone can be involved with, as Troy and Ray so eloquently stated. This takes a village, and it really is through the collective efforts of all of us that we can move our mission forward. Another way that you can support us is by joining us at our wonderful annual event. We've had some amazing events in years past, and this will be no exception. It's actually going to be a very unique event. It will be hopefully in person. It's going to be outside at the beautiful Maravilla Gardens. If you've been there, you know how gorgeous it is. If you haven't, you definitely have to check it out. One of the most beautiful venues in all of Ventura County. The event will be May 12th from 5 to 9 p.m. And one of the really cool things that I'm excited about for this event is going to be an immersive event. It's something that's different than what you typically do. So from the moment that you step onto the grounds of the beautiful Maravilla Gardens, you're immersed with other characters and hearing their stories come to life, through Jeff and Melissa and their 2 children, a struggling college student and barista Javier, a high school teacher, Miss Jasmine, and her students, Daniela and Cassie. You'll experience the housing insecurity through the eyes of foster youth Carla, veteran Ted, and recently widowed Rosa. And Jason will show you the feelings of being cognitively impaired while yearning to live independently. So you really actually get to feel and live some of the experiences that represent some of the people that are served by the housing that we build. Again, as we talked about, really it all comes down to people and their stories and how we can help improve our community and every individual's lives. So we really hope that you can come out to this event. It is a fundraising event. We have fantastic sponsors, which I'll talk a little bit more about on the next slide. So we're really excited to announce City National Bank. They are our 2022 Compassion Campaign Keystone title sponsor. And for any of you who don't do fundraising, getting a title sponsor is always challenging, but we're so grateful for the support of City National Bank. Here's a quote that I'll read from Ray Mendoza, the Vice President of Community Development for City National Bank. The majority of low to moderate income households in Ventura County are rent burdened, and we all know that. This awareness forms the foundation of City National Bank's support for ongoing affordable housing efforts here in Ventura County, across California, and throughout their national footprint. The bank believes that when community thrives, we all thrive. We hope that our efforts supporting the Housing Trust Fund Ventura County's objective that everyone deserves a home. And again, thank you, Ray, and thank you, City National Bank. And also, we're further excited. It's so recent that we didn't have a chance to put a slide together. A CIT, a division of First Citizens Bank, has just become a pillar sponsor of our 2022 Compassion Campaign. So thank you to CIT. Again, these are 2 major donations. We have other fundraising opportunities that we'd love for you to be a part of if you haven't already. And again, we hope we see you all at this wonderful event. And again, and thank you all for attending our annual meeting. A special thank you to Ray, Pearl, to Troy Brown, to all of our sponsors, to Linda, to the Coverly Pro team, to Tracy McCauley for also speaking, and our wonderful board of directors. We really couldn't do this without all of your support. So thank you for taking the time to spend with us today, to learn a little bit more about what we're doing and contributing your passion and your resources to fulfilling this mission. So thank you and have a great afternoon.
Have a great day, everybody. Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Lonesome traveler, needing a friend to talk to. You say, come just as you are. You take my hands, warm my fingers. Worthy you are, worthy. Speak your truth, tell your story. In all your shame, in all your glory.
All right, how'd we do?
Just a moment, please.